He sold our position for a bag of cash. That night, 15 men died, and I lived to make him pay. I'm not starting with an explanation because explanations come later like excuses. Right now, you need to know the cost. The street went from quiet to violent in 2 breaths. The first blast threw men into the gutter. The second turned bodies into silhouettes against a wall of fire. Bullets stitched the air like angry insects. Voices ripped into screams. Someone cried out a name that would never answer again. The smell of burning nylon and hot metal stuck in my throat. I tasted grit and iron, and a memory of my brother's hand gone limp in mine. In the chaos I crawled, feeling for pulses that were not there, counting faces I knew by the way they smiled. He was gone when the rotor noise dropped. There was only the echo of his boots and the way the moon caught on a folded map he had handed away. I watched 15 futures end in the rear view of that night and swore I would not let his silence stand. And what I did that night, no one ever saw coming. We came up through the same smoke and mud, the same stupid drills that break some men and forge others. He was the kind of leader you follow without thinking. Steady hands, calm voice, the one who moved first into danger and made it look like a calculation rather than chaos. I remember a night patrol where an IED blew the world sideways, and I landed half-buried, ears ringing. He crawled through the wire without hesitation, ripped my pack off, dragged me into a shallow ditch, and kept pressure on my leg until medics came. He didn't brag about it afterward. He just handed me a smoke and said, "Get up when you can." That was the moment I put my life in his hands. Officers liked him. He kept his uniform clean even when the rest of us were caked in dust. Men trusted his calls because his calls kept them breathing. In the chow tent, he'd listen to a joke, then finish it with a grin that made you laugh even if you were tired. We made plans, a backyard bar, a long drive home, like boys who believed promises were contracts. With him, the future felt reachable. But there was always something too calm about the way he smiled after missions, like he already knew the ending. I chalked it up to nerve. I didn't understand then that calm can hide commerce, that a steady hand can also be the hand that signs the papers. The truth would come later, and it would feel like being punched by someone you loved. The order came down at dawn. Recon a sector just outside Fallujah, deep in what everyone called the red zone. No air support, no overwatch, just boots on dirt and a map marked with too many question marks. Even before we rolled out, the air felt wrong, thick and electric. The kind of morning where the sky never really turns blue, just a dull gray that presses on your chest. We checked our rifles twice, radios 3 times. Static hissed through the headset, chewing up half the words. "Comm interference," he said, brushing it off like dust on his sleeve. When one of the guys asked why we weren't taking the usual northern route, he didn't blink. "Intel confirmed it's clear," he replied, eyes fixed on the horizon. It wasn't the words that bothered me. It was the tone. Too quick, too clean. The hum of the Humvee engine mixed with the faint smell of gasoline and metal. I watched his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked calm, like a man following a script he'd already memorized. Every turn we took narrowed the road, the buildings leaning in closer, shadows stretching long. Halfway there, one of the radios went dead. Then another. The only sound left was the rattle of armor plates and the low click of safeties flicking off. My gut twisted. This wasn't recon. It was a setup. I didn't know yet for what or for who, but the quiet was starting to feel like bait. It happened fast. Too fast for warning, too loud for thought. The first explosion lifted the lead Humvee clean off the ground, flipping it like a toy. Fire rolled down the street, swallowing everything in its path. The shockwave threw me into a wall, ribs cracking on impact. Before I could catch my breath, the second blast came, sharper, closer. Then the shooting started. Bullets hissed through the smoke. I saw Martinez go down clutching his neck, blood pouring through his fingers. Reeves was screaming, dragging a man whose legs were gone. The air smelled like fuel, flesh, and dust, a metallic nightmare. Every shout over the radio turned into static. Every call for backup went nowhere. I looked for him, the commander. No answer. His channel was dead. Between bursts of gunfire, I caught a glimpse of his shadow slipping behind the wrecks, heading away from us. For a second I thought he was regrouping. Then he never came back. I crawled under a slab of concrete, heart pounding against broken ribs, trying not to breathe. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard voices. Not American, they were laughing. One of them said, clear as daylight. The coordinates were perfect. Your American friend keeps his word. The words sank like ice into my veins. My mind tried to reject them, but my gut already knew. We hadn't been ambushed. We'd been sold. The gunfire faded, replaced by the crackle of burning vehicles and the sound of men dying slow. I stayed hidden until the night swallowed the fire, staring at what was left of my unit. 15 men, brothers, burned in the dirt because one man wanted to live rich. When the shooting stopped and the smoke thinned, I was the only one breathing. They pulled me out 2 days later, half-conscious, covered in ash, body held together by stitches and rage. The report called it a communication failure. I called it what it was. Treason. Back at base, I couldn't sleep. The official story didn't match the scars, so I started digging. I hacked into signal logs, traced encrypted radio bursts that had no business being on our channel. The timestamps lined up perfectly, minutes before the ambush. Then came the bank records, hidden under a fake logistics account. A foreign transfer. Gold, not dollars. Clean, quiet, enough to buy a house or a conscience. One night, while replaying his recorded briefings, I caught his voice saying something I'd forgotten. We all fight for something. Back then, I thought he meant freedom, loyalty, survival. But now I knew what he fought for. Money. The kind that doesn't bleed, doesn't ask questions, doesn't come home in a coffin. I stared at the screen until my hand stopped shaking. Every piece fit, every lie made sense. He hadn't just sold our position. He sold the idea that any of us ever mattered. I thought betrayal hurt. I was wrong. It kills everything it touches. Night came heavy that evening, pressing against the walls of the barracks like it wanted in. The air smelled of oil and silence. Around me, the camp slept. Men dreaming of home, of people who still believed war had rules. I sat alone at the table, my M4 across my knees, the faint scrape of the cleaning rod the only sound keeping time with my heartbeat. Each click of the clock felt louder than the last. I'd lost everything that made me a soldier. Brothers who trusted me, faith in the flag on my sleeve, the belief that orders meant purpose. All that was left was the truth, and the truth was poison. I took out a scrap of paper, tore it from an old field report, and started writing. Not to my family. They'd already buried me in their minds. This letter was for something colder, justice, for the 15 men burned into the dirt, for every name that would never be spoken again. Outside, the wind moved through the tents like a whisper. I chambered around, the metallic click, clean and final. I wasn't praying for forgiveness. I wasn't asking for peace. When the sun sets, so does mercy. I found him alone in his tent, under the thin flicker of a lantern. The night was dead quiet. No guards, no chatter, just the hum of a generator somewhere far off. He didn't look surprised when I stepped inside. Maybe he'd been expecting me. Stacks of bills lay on the table, bundled tight with rubber bands. His laptop glowed faint blue, a half-written report on the screen. I caught the words ambushed, heroic withdrawal. He was rewriting the war. He didn't even look up when he spoke. "You should be sleeping," he said, calm as ever. "How much is a man's life worth to you?" I asked. That made him pause. He set the pen down, turned his head, and smiled, that same quiet, knowing smile. "Enough," he said. "Enough to buy silence." For a moment, the world stopped breathing. I felt my finger twitch near the trigger. He stood, slow and deliberate, his hand brushing the pistol at his side. "You wouldn't dare," he said softly. "You need me alive to prove anything." I placed my rifle on the table between us. The safety clicked off, sharp as a blade. Moonlight cut through the canvas, glinting off the metal. His breath caught. Mine didn't. No shouts, no witnesses, just the sound of two men breathing in the dark. And then, by sunrise, the story was already written. The report said the commander was killed in an insurgent raid. Quick, clean, tragic. No mention of the gunshot at midnight. No mention of the money or the blood that bought it. Just another heroic death filed neatly in the archives. They transferred me within hours. No questions, no ceremony. A handshake, a new assignment, and a silence heavier than any order I'd ever followed. The message was clear. Say nothing, forget everything. But secrets don't stay buried forever. In a locked office somewhere, a classified report carried the real details, the unedited version. The brass knew. They always know. And they chose to let the lie live because it was easier to salute than to dig. The funeral came a week later. Rows of uniforms, polished boots, flags folded just right. I stood in the back, unseen, watching them lower his coffin. The metal he'd once worn gleamed against the dark fabric of his dress blues, catching the sun one last time. People whispered words like honor, sacrifice, duty. I whispered something else. "He died a hero," I said under my breath. "But heroes don't sell their brothers." Years later, I came home to a country that didn't remember my name. I worked quiet jobs, kept to the shadows, tried to pretend the desert hadn't followed me back. The nights were still the worst, long, heavy, filled with echoes that didn't fade. One winter evening, a knock came at the door. A young officer stood outside, face unreadable. He handed me a plain envelope, saluted once, and walked away without a word. Inside was a single note, typed, unsigned. "You did what we couldn't." Beneath it lay a bullet, polished cold and etched with a name I hadn't spoken in years. His. I turned it in my fingers, felt its weight. It wasn't just metal. It was memory, debt, truth. He sold our position for gold. I sold my soul for peace. And in the end, both of us paid in blood.